Hey everyone, today we're going to be taking a look at Grimtooth Traps, which is a famous book of ridiculous over-the-top death traps for you to load up your dungeon with. These traps are famously comedic, no one really takes them very seriously, so I thought let's take a look and see what they actually look like. Maybe there's some forgotten gems in here, or maybe they're just as bad as everyone says and they're totally unsalvageable. There's only one way to find out. Let's dig into it. This episode is brought to you by The Waking of Willoughby Hall, which is a haunted manor crawl that I wrote, and it's compatible with any OSR system or really any D&D-like game. So try and escape a rampaging giant, collect a magic goose, fight a whole bunch of other NPCs that are wandering around in here, talk to ghosts. It's a fun time. I'll put links down in the description below if you want to buy it and help support the channel. First of all, the infamous wheel trap designed by Paul O'Connor. So it looks like the idea here is that you walk in the front entrance and immediately the door slams shut behind you or slides shut so you can't get out. That's not great, but it's not necessarily really bad as long as there's a way that you could get through it, maybe with enough work and time. Anyway, straight ahead of you, you see a ramp going up with a groove in it. And at the far end of the ramp, you see a wall with a door in it. And then on your left and right sides, there's a bunch of barrels. But if you try and move the barrels, it says that you can't open them, you can't move them, they're just fixed to the floor. Already, I'm not a huge fan of that. It feels really artificial, like you're just trying to get one over on the players, which the book probably is. But once you start going up the ramp, that's when the fun starts. So the wall at the far end of the ramp, with the door in it, slides into the ground, and behind it is a big, long cylinder. And that starts rolling towards you at high speeds. And you're going to get smushed by it as it rams through you, through the barrels, and then into the wall on the far end. So you can try and get out of its way. Maybe you can try and dive into it. There is this channel running up the middle of the ramp that you can dive into to try and allow it to roll over your head. But if you do that, then there is a wheel right behind it rolling in the groove that's also going to crush you. So it kind of gets you no matter what you want to do. The main way to get around this is to climb over the barrels to the left or to the right sides. That way you would avoid the giant cylinder. But as the cylinder smashes into the barrels, you discover that they're full of acid or some other horrible material, and you get splashed and drowned with that. So it gets you pretty much no matter what way you want to do it. Already, this has some interesting elements to it that I think could be salvaged. There's a couple significant problems with it, though. First of all, it says that the cylinder is anti-magic, has an anti-magic spell on it, and it's indestructible. That's lame. You shouldn't do that sort of thing, because basically what you're doing is you're telling your players, oh, you thought of a good idea to get around this thing? No. It's just canceling out reasonable suggestions, so that's no good. Just making it a destructible wooden wheel would be great, because maybe players would have a spell where they could destroy it or alter it in some way and get a little bit more creative. I don't necessarily mind the barrels full of acid, but probably you should add more of a warning there. So maybe make them full of acid, but the tops are open. So as you walk in, you can immediately see that the room is full of acid barrels. This would give you time to prepare or to imagine what is going to happen. So that just give players a lot more information, and this could be a lot more fun. Next one is the Roman amphitheater trap. So this one's pretty straightforward. The idea here is that you walk into a room and there is a statue holding a giant metal ball up on top of a pedestal. As you walk into the room, you set off a trip where the whole room unbalances and the ball rolls or bounces out of the statue's hands towards you and crushes you. That's pretty straightforward. This isn't really too bad. I would add things like maybe dents in the floor near the entrance of the room, so you can see that something has in the past fallen there and dented the floor, so give you a little bit of a sense of what's going to go on. Overall, it's really not that bad, because you really do have a chance of escaping. You could jump out of the way, and as you walk into the room and you step on the floor and you feel the whole room tip slightly, that does give you a warning that something's not right. So I would give players a chance to react at that point. Overall, it's okay. I would use it, but I would probably try and make it a little bit more interesting. Illusions is a bit of a weird one. So at the top we see figure A, the trap as it appears. You see a spiked pit and you see a walkway going around it. But when you try and walk around it, what you discover is that those walkways are on top of springs that slam you up into the ceiling where a bunch of spikes have been hidden. Meanwhile, the spike pit is in fact not a spike pit at all. It's an illusion. You can walk right on top of it without taking any damage. It's kind of lame because there's really no way of figuring this out. I suppose if you're just using a 10-foot pole and you're poking everything, then you'd find it out ahead of time. So it would warn players not to rush into things without being very careful. It's just not very exciting or interesting, really. There's not a lot of creativity being shown here, and not a lot of chances for players to show off their own creativity and problem-solving skills. Illusions in general are just kind of boring. I much prefer traps where things are more out in the open, so players can get to thinking. The slider spiker trap reminds me a lot of Portal. So you'll be walking up this flight of stairs, and then as you get near the top, the stairs will fold into a ramp, and you'll slide down into a trapdoor at the base of the stairs. Once you fall into this, there is a portal that portals you up to the top of the room, where you fall down through a hole onto a spike. Not really impressed by this one either. It's very gimmicky, and there's all of these elements to it that I don't understand why they're there or what they really add to it. It's not super deadly. Really, players have a couple different opportunities to get out of this, whether on the slide, they could try and jump off of the slide, or even once they fall out of the ceiling, they could try and maneuver themselves by pushing off a wall maybe, so they don't fall directly onto the spike. But even the book admits that it's a incredibly confusing trap. So I'm not a huge fan of that sort of thing. The lobster trap is a weird one. So you awaken inside a cage, maybe after being captured by monsters or something like that. And you discover that there is a rope ladder going straight down to the floor, and your cage is hanging by a chain from the ceiling. And there's giant lobsters on the ground waiting to eat you. That's a pretty good setup. But then it's ruined by a couple different elements. First of all, you have invisible force fields. And this is not the first time that we're going to see that in Grimtooth traps. Invisible force fields are lame. They're really bad. Don't use them in traps. And this has a circular or cylindrical force field going straight to the ground that would actually protect you once you try and go down the rope ladder. Once you get into the rope ladder, you find a trapdoor at the very bottom where there are levers allowing you to control some stuff. If you do pull one of the levers, though, it'll turn off the force field and the lobsters will go for you. Meanwhile, if you go up the top of the cage, you'll find that the chain contraption that's you're hanging from, you can pull on some rings and slide your whole cage along a track towards one of the walls. This is not described very well in the book. It's not totally clear how that's supposed to work, especially since it says if you don't pull hard enough, then about halfway along this trap, the cage will drop to the ground and the lobsters will eat you. It's not described why this would happen. And this is one of my complaints with a lot of the traps here. There's a lot of things in here where it is actively trying to stop player creativity, and the gotcha moments aren't things that are the player's fault. It's just things that are happened that you could never possibly foresee or that aren't fully explained. And I don't like that. I like my traps to be pretty mechanical so that players can see what's going on and then make decisions based on that. If you push far enough along this rail along the top, your little cage goes through the wall on the far side, which is actually made out of paper, and then you fall into a bed of feathers from which you could possibly escape. So waking up in a cage, that's cool. Giant lobsters, great. But a lot of the other elements really bring it down. The deluxe center post, which is our next trap, is actually really good. I really like this one. It's kind of a surprise. It's really simple, which is often true of the best traps. So it is a indestructible, usually that's not a good thing, but it works in this case. A deluxe magic staff that's indestructible that is wedged between the floor and the ceiling of the room. So you walk into the room and you just see this staff standing there. You try and grab the staff and it's just stuck. It's really wedged in there. And then if you try and get it out, maybe by taking a hammer blow to the bottom of the staff to unwedge it, the ceiling falls on you. The ceiling, which is a 10,000 pound block of granite. That's really nice because there's a temptation to go in there and get the staff. There's clearly something wrong with this room. How is this staff wedged so tightly between the floor and the ceiling? What is keeping it there? That should get the players thinking. And there are all sorts of creative ideas that you could come up with in order to get the staff without being crushed once you figure out what's going on. So A+ for that one. I would use that. The Bigger They Are is a trap designed by Mike Stackpole. I wonder if that's the same Michael Stackpole who's the Star Wars writer. That would be really interesting. I don't know if that's the case. So this one's pretty straightforward. You're in a room where the room starts filling up with water, and there is a bit of rock that's sticking out from the ceiling up at the top. And if you throw a grappling hook up to climb up, then it tips over and falls on you as you pull on it. It's not terrible. It's just not that interesting. It feels like the players really couldn't do much to see that coming. Although I guess if they pulled on it a little bit, they could see it begin to tip and then get out of the way. But really, there's not a lot of creativity there. It's not terribly interesting. Wouldn't use it. It's not a bad trap. It's just, why? Next up is the one that got away, which is pretty classic Grimtooth in just being a ridiculous Rube Goldberg system of death. And in this situation, you have a chair that's sitting on a dock overlooking perhaps an underground lake. And there is a fishing pole stuck there with its line in the water already taut. So if the player sits down on the chair to pick up this fishing pole, there's a spring underneath the chair that shoots them up into the air. Meanwhile, the string on the fishing pole rapidly pulls in. So there's two situations here. One, the players let go of the fishing pole as they are shot into the air. If that happens, they slam into the pointy stalactites on the ceiling. The other option is they hold on the whole time and they are whipped around in a circle into the water and onto the spiky coral that is right beneath the surface. So, you know what? I think this is kind of funny, to be honest. It's not as bad as you might think, mostly because the setup is so weird that players, if they're thinking at all, should know that something is up immediately. You have a fishing rod with a taut line attached to a dock or to a chair right in an underground lake. There's something weird going on here right away. Just sitting down and picking up, you're basically asking for something bad to happen to you. So I'm fine with this one. I think it would be pretty funny. I don't know if I would kill them immediately by slamming them into the coral, but they would probably take damage just from messing around with this thing. This would work well in, of course, a very weird and funhouse gonzo style dungeon. Or if you have a lot of monsters that go fishing. The last one we're going to look at here is the bridge at Rue Vincent. I'm not totally sure what the name comes from, but the idea is actually quite good. You have a room that is full pretty deep with boiling oil. It says boiling wax in the description, but the picture says boiling oil for some reason. And there are fumes rising from that. And there is a narrow wooden walkway with no guardrails or anything running straight across the room to the other side. And this bridge is guarded by a flint golem. So the whole trap here, or it's really more of a situation, is that if you fight the flint golem with anything involving metal, like a sword, for example, once you hit it, you're going to have iron on flint, and you're going to have sparks. And the sparks are going to fall down into the boiling oil and into the fumes and ignite the room in a huge inferno that roasts you alive. This is excellent. This is a really good trap. And that's because every aspect of it is obvious from the beginning. When you're in the room, you can see the boiling oil on the floor. You can smell the fumes in the air. You can see that the enemy coming towards you is a golem made of a flinty rock material. As a game master, I would just tell the players that. So attacking it with a sword and then having sparks fall out of it, that's something that you could have seen coming if you had been paying attention. So if you die in a giant raging inferno, you only had yourself to blame. And you'll kick yourself and you'll probably smile because, yeah, I had that coming. That's really good. I absolutely love that one. So that's a great note to end on. So looking at Grimtooth traps overall, it really is a mixed bag. There's some stuff in here that's really eye-rolling, where especially when you run into these invisible force fields, which are just, come on, don't put that sort of thing in your game, because that just is a way of cutting out player creativity. But there are some submissions here, because these are all submitted from different people, that are really clever and allow players to be clever on their own. And I really appreciate that. If you've enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below, and maybe we'll do another one. This is the first section of just room traps from book 1. But the next section coming up is corridor traps, so maybe we can take a look at that too. All right, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll put a link down in the description below if you want to pick up Grimtooth traps for yourself. And thanks for watching. See you next time.